This is India's #1 news network, and you're watching News 9. English news as it should be.
Very good morning. You're watching News 9. I'm Karthik Malhotra. And on the show today, the countdown has begun for Group Captain Shubhanshu Shukla to be the first ISRO astronaut to go on board the Axiom 4 to the International Space Station. That's a big story that we're tracking for you, and we will bring you all the details on the show today. But also on the show, the Israel-Iran ceasefire seems to be holding, at least for now. The US dollar, the gold prices as well as oil have slipped, and there's good news likely for the Indian stock markets. Mohit Gang will be here to unpack all that for you. You're watching Morning Brief at 9. Morning Brief at 9. First up, let's bring you all the global stories that we are tracking for you this morning. US President Donald Trump arrives at NATO summit in The Hague. Member nations aim to solidify Trump's support with major pledge to boost defense spending. In line with expectations, Germany announces plans to raise defense spending to 3.5% of its GDP by the year 2029, aligns with new NATO ambitions just as the summit gets underway in The Hague. NATO chief Mark Rutte warns that Russia must not outproduce the alliance, calls for urgent cooperation between Europe and the United States. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump accuses both Israel and Iran of violating a ceasefire just hours after announcing the deal, says he does not want regime change in Iran. US Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell says rising tariffs could push inflation higher by as early as summer as central bank weighs potential interest rate cuts. Meanwhile, global central banks rethink reserve strategies amid deepening global conflicts, turning towards gold, euro, and China's yuan as trust in the US dollar shifts. The US Supreme Court clears the way for Trump administration to speed up deportations without hearings, tightening immigration policy. American coffee chain Starbucks dismisses reports of a potential sale of its China operations, says no plan to exit one of the fastest growing markets. And Britain proposes tighter oversight of Google, suggesting it must be given strategic market status to regulate dominance in search services. The top story this morning coming from the Netherlands. US President Donald Trump arrived at NATO summit in The Hague on Tuesday as member nations aimed to solidify his support with a major pledge to boost defense spending. Now, Trump joined the leaders of NATO's 34 other countries at a royal dinner hosted by Dutch King Willem-Alexander in the elegant Orange Hall. Now, NATO hopes to anchor Trump's commitment to collective defense by embracing his call for members to spend at least 5% of their GDP on defense. Now, on the summit sidelines, Turkish President Erdogan met Donald Trump, emphasizing deepening defense collaboration and setting sights on a $100 billion trade goal. According to a statement from Ankara on X, the two leaders also discussed opportunities in energy and investment sectors. Meanwhile, Germany has announced plans to raise defense spending to 3.5% of its GDP by the year 2029, aligning with new NATO ambitions just as the summit gets underway in The Hague. Chancellor Friedrich Merz, his government advanced the move by easing debt limits, setting the stage for a major shift in defense priorities. Finance Minister Lars Klingbeil says the spending will reach 2.4% this year and grow steadily over the next 5 years. And And speaking at the Defense Forum ahead of the NATO summit, Secretary General of NATO Mark Rutte urged Europe and America to unite in the face of rising global defense challenges, warning that Russia must not outproduce a far wealthier alliance. Rutte reminded allies that NATO must win the new war of production. Listen in.
There's no defense without a strong defense industry. And there's no European security without a strong transatlantic bond. So we need to bring down barriers and encourage truly transatlantic defense cooperation. Only Europe and North America together can rise up and meet the challenge. But we need to do more, we need to do it better and together, and we need to do it now. It is simply unthinkable that Russia, with an economy 25 times smaller than NATO's, should be able to outproduce and outgun us. We must spend more to prevent war. We must win this new war of production. That's what this summit is all about.
And just ahead of the NATO summit, US President Donald Trump had lashed out at both Israel and Iran on Tuesday, accusing the warring nations of breaching a fresh ceasefire just hours after it came into effect. While Israel claimed that Iran fired missiles, Tehran denied it and accused Tel Aviv of prolonging the conflict. Listen to US President's reaction to those claims.
Israel, as soon as we made the deal, they came out and they dropped a load of bombs, the likes of which I'd never seen before. The biggest load that we've seen. I'm not happy with Israel. You know, when I say, okay, now you have 12 hours, you don't go out in the first hour and just drop everything you have on them. So I'm not happy with them. I'm not happy with Iran either. But I'm really unhappy if Israel's going out this morning because of one rocket that didn't land, that was shot, perhaps by mistake, that didn't land. I'm not happy about that.
Well, Donald Trump definitely not happy. Well, Trump also made it clear that he does not want to see a regime change in Iran, which according to the US president would only lead to further chaos in the region. Listen in.
I'd like to see everything calm down as quickly as possible. Regime change takes chaos, and ideally we don't want to see so much chaos, so we'll see how it does. You know, the Iranians are very good traders, very good business people, and they got a lot of oil. They should be fine. They should be able to rebuild and do a good job. They're never going to have nuclear, but other than that, they should do a great job, which is exactly where I've been saying for years, you cannot let Iran have a nuclear weapon.
Meanwhile, US Vice President J.D. Vance applauded President Donald Trump's recent military decisions during a Republican dinner in Lima, Ohio on Tuesday. Vance praised Trump's move to strike Iranian nuclear facilities with B-2 bombers, saying it followed 60 days of intense talks with Iran and reflected the president's decisive instincts. Listen in to J.D. Vance.
For 60 days, he negotiated aggressively to encourage that Iranian regime to give up those weapons peacefully. And by the way, he was more than willing to accept a peaceful settlement to that problem. But again, this comes back to instincts. When the president realized that there was not going to be a peaceful settlement to that problem, he sent B-2 bombers and dropped 12 30,000-pound bombs on the worst facility and destroyed that program. And to the Americans who are worried about this becoming a protracted conflict, I think the president solved that very quickly. Not only did we destroy the Iranian nuclear program, we did it with 0 American casualties, and that's what happens when you've got strong American leadership.
Now, saying with strong American leadership, well, the 12 bunker buster bombs that the B-2 bombers dropped on Iran was followed by Iran striking a U.S. base in Qatar with 12 missiles. But according to a media report, preliminary U.S. intelligence assessment suggests that the recent American airstrikes on Iranian nuclear facilities may have just delayed Tehran's nuclear program by only as much as a few months. And this classified finding appears to contradict public claims from Donald Trump and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, who declared that Iran's nuclear capabilities had been obliterated. Take a look at this detailed report.
A preliminary U.S. intelligence assessment determined that U.S. strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities over the weekend only set its nuclear program back by a matter of months. That's according to 3 sources with knowledge of the matter. The classified assessment is at odds with the statements of President Donald Trump and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, who both said that the strikes had, quote, obliterated Iran's nuclear ambitions. Trump has said the attacks were necessary to prevent Iran from developing a nuclear weapon. Iran denies it is seeking such a weapon and says its nuclear program is for peaceful purposes. One source said the initial assessment was not universally accepted and had generated significant disagreement. A U.S. official speaking on condition of anonymity said the U.S. did not know the extent of the damage yet. Still, the preliminary assessment indicated the strikes may not have been nearly as successful as the Trump administration has claimed. One of the sources said Iran's enriched uranium stocks had not been eliminated, and that the country's nuclear program may have been set back by only a month or two. The Pentagon disputed the notion that the damage to Iran's nuclear program was minor. In a statement provided to Reuters, Hegseth said, quote, based on everything we have seen, and I've seen it all, our bombing campaign obliterated Iran's ability to create nuclear weapons. The White House did not immediately respond to a request for comment. In a statement to CNN, which first reported the intelligence assessment, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said the conclusion was, quote, flat out wrong.
And staying with the U.S., but shifting to U.S. tariffs that come into effect exactly 2 weeks from now on July 9th. Well, U.S. Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell told lawmakers on Tuesday that rising tariffs could push inflation higher as early as this summer, just as the central bank weighs potential interest rate cuts. Now, Powell's remarks suggest the Fed may hold off on easing the price pressures return, keeping markets on edge over the timing of future policy moves. Listen in.
If it turns out that inflation pressures do remain contained, then we will get to a place where we cut rates sooner rather than later. But I wouldn't want to point to a particular meeting. I don't think we need to be in any rush because the economy is still strong. The labor market is strong. If you just look in the rearview mirror and look at the existing data that we've seen, you can make a good argument that that would call for us to be at a neutral level, which would be, a couple of cuts or maybe more kind of thing. The reason we're not is the forecast by all professional forecasters that I know of on the outside and the Fed do expect a meaningful increase in inflation over the course of this year.
And well, staying with central banks, now trillions in central bank reserves may soon see a shakeup as financial powers begin pivoting away from the US dollar and moving towards gold, the euro and the yuan. Comes amid growing global tensions and shifting trade dynamics. Take a look at this report.
The custodians of trillions of dollars of global central bank reserves are eyeing a move away from the greenback, with gold, the euro and China's yuan all in favour. It comes as the splintering of world trade and geopolitical upheaval has sparked a rethink of financial flows. A report by the official Monetary and Financial Institutions Forum is due to be published later on Tuesday. It says 1 in 3 central banks managing a combined $5 trillion plan to increase exposure to gold over the next 2 years. The survey of 75 central banks was carried out between March and May and gives a first snapshot of the repercussions of Donald Trump's tariffs. Gold, which central banks have already been adding at a record pace, is expected to benefit further, with around 40% of central banks planning to increase gold holdings over the next decade. The US dollar, the most popular currency in last year's survey, fell to 7th place this year. 70% of those surveyed said the US political environment was discouraging them. In currencies, the euro and yuan stand to benefit the most from the diversification. Around 16% of central banks surveyed by OMFIF said they plan to increase euro holdings over the next 2 years. That makes it the most in-demand currency, up from 7% a year ago, followed by the yuan. The survey respondents expected the euro to reach about a 22% share of global reserves in 10 years' time, but Europe could attract a higher share of reserves sooner. Sources speaking to reserve managers say that's if the bloc is able to boost its pile of bonds that are currently dwarfed by the $29 trillion US Treasury market.
And a shifting stance there on the US dollar. Meanwhile, let's take a look at US markets that surged more than 1% on Tuesday as investors responded positively to a tentative ceasefire between Israel and Iran while closely analyzing Fed Chair Jerome Powell's testimony for hints on future interest rate cuts. Here's a detailed report.
U.S. stocks rallied on Tuesday with the Dow and S&P 500 gaining more than 1% each and the Nasdaq climbing nearly 1.5%. Tuesday marked the second straight session of solid gains following U.S. missile strikes on Iran's key nuclear facilities, with the S&P ending near its all-time closing high reached on February 19th. Meanwhile, the Nasdaq 100, a subset of the Nasdaq Composite, hit an all-time closing high. A fragile ceasefire between Israel and Iran boosted investor sentiment, said Rob Hayworth, Senior Investment Strategy Director at U.S. Bank Asset Management Group.
Stocks today are really relieved that there's a ceasefire out of Israel and Iran, and we're starting to see that relief rally push through. And that's in spite of weaker consumer sentiment, right? Consumer confidence numbers came in a little softer today, but really the market is getting that relief rally. And it's interesting, we're seeing it in places other than the U.S. with foreign stocks having a strong day as well. So it's nice to have a little easing in those Middle Eastern tensions.
On the economic front, pessimism over the jobs market, as reflected in the consumer confidence data for June, fell to its lowest level in more than 4 years. Investors also parsed comments on Capitol Hill from Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell, who reiterated his view that rate cuts can wait until the inflationary effects of tariffs are better known. Stocks on the move Tuesday included crypto exchange Coinbase Global, which rose 12% after Bitcoin hit a one-week high. Shares of Broadcom touched a record high on Tuesday, closing about 4% higher after HSBC raised the semiconductor manufacturer to buy from hold. And shares of FedEx dropped more than 5% in extended trading after the company issued a disappointing current quarter forecast.
And shifting gears now, the U.S. Supreme Court has allowed President Donald Trump's administration to deport migrants to third countries, a country that isn't one's own, without offering a hearing on potential dangers. The ruling is seen as a significant victory in Trump's hardline immigration push. Here's a report.
The U.S. Supreme Court is allowing the Trump administration, for now, to deport people to a country that isn't their own. It lifts an order from Boston-based U.S. District Judge Brian Murphy that migrants being sent to so-called third countries get what was called a meaningful opportunity to tell officials they're at risk of torture where they're going. The Supreme Court put that order on pause Monday while a legal challenge against it plays out. It hands President Donald Trump another victory in his aggressive pursuit of mass deportations. The Trump administration challenged Murphy's order after an attempt to send a group of migrants to politically unstable South Sudan, which the State Department has urged Americans to avoid, quote, due to crime, kidnapping, and armed conflict. Murphy found that the Trump administration had violated an order for additional steps before trying to send the migrants there. In May, he intervened, prompting the U.S. government to keep the migrants at a military base in Djibouti. The administration asked the Supreme Court to intervene after that. It told the court that its third country policy already complied with due process and was critical for removing migrants who commit crimes because, they say, their countries of origin are often unwilling to take them back. Monday's reversal from the Supreme Court was an emergency request and was unsigned without reasoning for the decision. The court has a 6-3 conservative majority. Its 3 liberal members dissented, with Justice Sonia Sotomayor writing that Monday's order was a, quote, gross abuse of the court's power. Reuters has also reported that U.S. officials had been weighing sending migrants to Libya, another politically unstable country that the U.S. has condemned for its harsh treatment of detainees.
Well, with that, we will slip into a very short break. But coming up on the other side, a mood check on the Indian stock markets as the Wall Street just opened a few minutes ago. Well, it looks like markets are in a good mood today. Mohit Gang will be here to unpack that for us. You're watching Morning Brief at 9.
देखना इन आंखों को अब ये ख्वाब बाकी सुननी इस दुनिया को मेरी खामोशी की आवाज बाकी है। समझते थे जिसे वो मुकाम मेरा, होना वहां से मेरा आगाज बाकी है। टाटा मोटर्स प्रस्तुत करता है अब मेरी बारी TV9 नेटवर्क के साथ। कर लीजिए सपनों को साकार करने की तैयारी। कहेंगे आप भी जल्द, अब मेरी बारी।
Who am I?
Nobody can crack that mystery.
There is a certain expectation of me.
That's the only contradiction.
Life itself is stranger than fiction.
I was a perfectly normal person born in an abnormal world.
I really didn't understand why is it different.
Just imagine a child who is bullied every day.
Boys school में कुछ लड़का लोग मेरे साथ sexual abuse किए।
मुझे तेरे बारे में सब पता है और मैं तेरा रेप कर लूँगा।
You also start to stigmatize.
अरे ये तो time pass है।
Sex doesn't come in the picture. Sex comes very late. Then there are man-made narratives.
Why do you walk like that? Why do you sway so much? So you can understand the trauma of a person who's trapped in a wrong body.
But nothing can bind life.
We have to reclaim the lost position.
We fought for more than 10 years. Today I'm the mother of the industry.
I'm a first transgender member judge.
You can't walk in everybody's shoes.
This is what I'm comfortable with. They just are what they are.
You become the light yourself.
That is the change that I was looking for.
When I recognize myself is a small story, but it's an interesting one.
Welcome back. You're watching Morning Brief at 9. Let's bring you a mood check of the markets. Let's begin first with Asia, and the ceasefire between Israel and Iran seems to be doing well for the entire region, and most indices in Asia seem to be registering healthy gains this morning. In fact, the Hang Seng is up almost 0.8% in early trade today. You've also got good news coming in from Taiwan's TAIEX, which is up more than 1% in trade, and the Shanghai Composite Index is also up about 1/3 of a percentage point. The only exception coming from Japan, which is mostly flat, albeit a little bit in the red this morning. Similar sentiment also seen on the Indian stock markets. Sensex and Nifty are both registering healthy 0.5 percentage point gains. Let's bring that up for you. Let's look at the Indian stock markets. And Sensex, Nifty, as well as the mid-cap and the small-cap indices are all in the green this morning. Nifty 50 is holding comfortably above the 25,100 levels, registering about 0.5 percentage point gain this morning, just 5 minutes into markets open. Meanwhile, Sensex is heading towards the 82,500 territory and should get there soon. Meanwhile, the small-cap and the mid-cap indices also performing well. Volatility in the Indian markets has been lowered thanks to perhaps the ceasefire and softening on oil prices. Let's look at the Nifty 50 heat map and try and make some sense of what are the sectors which are registering gains this morning. Well, as expected, the energy companies, including Reliance and ONGC as well as Coal India, are all in the positive territory. We are also seeing a knock-on effect of the US markets on India's IT pack, which seems to be registering healthy gains this morning. The banking sector, however, does not seem to be in a very good mood this morning. ICICI Bank is down about 0.5%. Similar story coming in from Kotak Mahindra Bank, down about 0.4% or so. Meanwhile, all other stocks, including those of the Adani Group, are doing well in trade. We will try and discover the reasons for those in just a bit. But joining us on the show today is Mohit Gang, co-founder and CEO of Moneyfront. Mohit, good morning. Spate of good news coming for the Indian markets. First, the ceasefire between Israel and Iran, softening of oil prices, as well as good momentum on the Indian rupee. What's driving or likely to drive the mood of the markets here on?
Hi Karthik, good morning. And yes, I think you've rightly summarized everything which is sounding and looking good this morning. Honestly, I think the biggest positive for the markets is the ceasefire between Israel and Iran, though it was called day before also, but I think yesterday the market had a kind of a itch that somewhere there was a violation of the ceasefire, but and we saw heavy selling by FIs yesterday. But thankfully, I think there seems to be semblance of peace now. There seems to be a ceasefire now, and given the global mood today morning, which is US ending in positive yesterday night, US tech doing extremely well, which augurs very well for global markets, and obviously all the global indices looking in green, right? And aided by good numbers which continue to pour from the Indian market. Karthik, I would give a good amount of credit to the global scenario.
Well, we will try to bring Mohit Gang back. Meanwhile, the Indian rupee made a strong comeback on Tuesday, rebounding sharply from record lows to post its steepest single-day gain in nearly 5 years. The currency jumped 73 paisa to settle at 86.05 against the US dollar. Now, this was driven by sharp decline in global crude oil prices and easing geopolitical tensions in West Asia. Brent crude, the global benchmark oil index, plunged over 3% to $69.20 per barrel after US President Donald Trump announced a ceasefire agreement between Iran and Israel. Forex traders said the rupee rally was further supported by a weaker US dollar globally and strong domestic equity markets. Let's look at the markets as they're faring right now. Good news coming in from most indices. The Sensex and the Nifty are up in trade this morning. Mohit Gang continues to be with us. Mohit, tell us exactly how oil prices, which have now eased to lows that are mouth-watering, now that the ceasefire seems to be holding and potentially the conflict in West Asia could draw towards a final conclusion. What happens to the impact of oil prices on the Indian economy and on the mood of markets from here on?
Sure. Karthik, I think I'm getting a bit of a pause when I speak, just for a mild second. But yeah, I'll try and put my views on the oil thing. So look, honestly, I think oil coming down is by far the most fantastic news which Indian markets can hope for. And that's the biggest positive which we see around. And the way oil has cooled off in last 2 days, I think it's dramatic. And that gives you a good semblance of peace, gives you a good macro impetus. And I think overall Indian growth also, if you see the GDP numbers which have been forecasted by global agencies for FY26 are back at 6.5%. So I think that's where the markets are celebrating the good news. The GDP numbers looking back at 6.5 and the oil cooling off.
All right, let's move on. Mohit, stay with us. I also want to bring your opinion into the defense talks, and that has also been talk of the town, especially with the ceasefire. But meanwhile, the story coming in from HAL is that India is set to take a major leap in indigenous defense manufacturing, with Hindustan Aeronautics Limited, or HAL, expected to seal a landmark jet engine deal with US defense giant GE Aerospace by the month of March next year. Now, speaking to PTI, HAL Chairman and Managing Director DK Sunil confirmed that key negotiations on technology transfer have been concluded, with both sides now working through the commercial aspects. The agreement, part of a mega plan first announced during Prime Minister Modi's 2023 US visit, involves joint production of GE's F414 engines in India, a critical component for the Tejas light combat aircraft Mark II and the upcoming advanced medium combat aircraft prototypes as well. Now, meanwhile, HAL is also preparing for another milestone, the 62,700 crore rupee contract to supply as many as 156 light combat helicopters, Prachand, to the Indian Army. Now, deliveries will begin in 2028, with all helicopters fully manufactured in India. Now, the Prachand, capable of operating at altitudes above 4,500 meters, is India's first indigenously designed combat helicopter equipped with rockets and anti-tank guided missiles. HAL stock this morning, though, tumbling down about a third of a percentage point. Mohit, one tends to believe that every time the scenario of conflict is hot, defense stocks tend to do well, and as the momentum of conflict reduces, we see the defense stocks start ebbing a little lower. But a spate of good announcements coming from HAL, but not reflecting in the stock story at all.
Look, I think there's no dearth of good announcements given the geopolitical scenario, Karthik. Only thing is the execution capability. The order books are all full. Order books are all full across the names. The multiples are soaring. The valuations are crazy, and only the execution has to be seen and justified. Honestly, if they can show and prove execution, which perhaps might be the case with few large cap names, but few small caps names quoting at crazy valuations, I really doubt whether they can successfully execute those kind of order books, right? So one has to be very, very cautious and cognizant of the fact that yes, the geopolitical scenario kind of supports the defense as a sector, but they aren't coming cheap to you.
A final question on the defense talks to you, Mohit, and this comes from the fact that defense spending in the European Union is now likely to go up. In fact, Germany has already announced that it will take up defense budget to about 3.5% of GDP, and this pressure on all other European economies also to over time take defense spending up to 5% of GDP. Does that augur well for India's own defense capabilities and orders flowing into India, or do you think India is yet to become a formidable player in defense manufacturing?
Look, honestly, when it comes to advanced fighter jets, advanced drone technologies and other things, I think India is still at a very nascent stage, and I don't think so India commands a huge export market out there. But yes, if the overall market expands, we will tend to benefit to some extent, right? We will perhaps benefit from the fallout or maybe from the auxiliaries of all these players. So yes, there is a little bit of a positive sentiment around which we will benefit from, but I don't think so it's a massive uplift for the Indian defense export per se.
All right. And one final question before I let you go, Mohit, and this is coming in from, of course, the US tariff perspective. Exactly 2 weeks to go. We're still far from stitching that bilateral trade agreement with the United States, and tariffs likely to come into effect on the 9th of July, unless, of course, there's another U-turn or another extension of deadline by Donald Trump, which may not be all that unsurprising. But the fact is that Indian markets seem to have already priced in those tariffs. What are some of the shocks that could come and hit India closer to that date?
Look, I think, and I'm still hopeful that we will kind of stitch a trade deal together, whether a full-blown trade deal or a fully blown FTA. I doubt that, but yes, there would be some bit of a trade deal which will stitch together. And I think now that the West Asia conflict is past us, the bulk of it is past us. I think now all eyes are back to the trade desk across the globe. So, and my sense is India-US is perhaps the biggest item on the table right now. So whatever India and US decide on the trade part, I think that will shape up the markets going forward in a big way.
All right, Mohit Gang, let's leave it at that. Always a pleasure having you right here on News 9. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you. My pleasure.
And before we slip into a break, let's look at some of the domestic business and economy stories right from India that we're tracking for you this morning. India close to signing free trade agreements with the United States and the European Union as export push aims for $2 trillion target by 2030. This as per Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman. Gautam Adani denies wrongdoing as US investigates alleged $265 million bribery scheme, says no FCPA violations or obstruction charges against group members. Aviation watchdog DGCA flags recurring aircraft defects, worn out tires and outdated simulators in surprise airport surveillance following the tragic Ahmedabad plane crash. Corrective measures ordered within 7 days. Meanwhile, Union Telecom Minister Jyotiraditya Scindia warns against telecom duopoly, pushes for intense competition and affordable devices. India launches a scheme to promote manufacturing of electric passenger cars portal to boost domestic manufacturing of EV passenger vehicles. Applications open until October 21st as per Union Minister H.D. Kumaraswamy. Like I told you, the rupee has rebounded from record low with the biggest single day gain yesterday in nearly 5 years, surging 73 paisa to settle at 86.05 against the US dollar. HAL has finalized a jet deal, is likely to finalize a jet engine deal with GE Aerospace for Tejas Mark II and advanced medium combat aircraft. India's biggest combat helicopter contract for Prachand also underway with deliveries from 2028. Novo Nordisk has launched the weight loss drug Wegovy in India ahead of patent expiry. Once weekly injectable priced up to 26,000 rupees per month across 5 dosage options. And the big story this morning, NASA, Axiom Space and SpaceX to launch the AX-4 mission to the International Space Station. ISRO's Shubhanshu Shukla to become first Indian astronaut aboard ISS in private space flight achievement. All these stories and more on the other side of the break. You're watching Morning Brief at 9.
What began as a day of celebration turned into a tragedy. The High Court has stepped in and political blame game has ensued. Why is it so difficult in Indian society to say no, mistake has been made? This timeline is going to make things very clear. This was very much avoidable. Unparalleled scene, unimaginable to watch. America and Europe are reaping what they have sown. Is this the new frontier of the American politics?
Welcome back. Now, in a push in favor of India's global trade ambitions, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman said negotiations for free trade agreements with the United States and the European Union are progressing at a rapid pace and are expected to conclude soon. Now, speaking at a conclave, Sitharaman highlighted that all efforts are underway to boost exports and meet the ambitious target of $2 trillion of exports by 2030. Now, India has already sealed trade deals with the UAE, Australia and the European Free Trade Association bloc and completed negotiations with the United Kingdom. The Finance Minister also underlined key budget announcements, including the launch of the Export Promotion Mission and Bharat Trade Net, a unified digital platform aimed at simplifying trade documentation and financing. The National Framework for Global Capability Centers is also on the cards to boost service sector growth in emerging cities. Pointing to India's record-breaking exports of $825 billion in the last financial year, a 6% jump from the previous year, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman lauded Indian exporters for outperforming global peers even as worldwide trade expanded by just 4%. She assured continued government support, urging businesses to focus on innovation and explore new markets. Quoting the latest World Investment Report by the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, the Finance Minister noted that India's global investment appeal remains intact, with as much as $668 billion in FDI flowing into the country over the past decade, nearly 67% of all FDI received since the turn of the millennium. Moving to some corporate news now, Adani Group Chairman Gautam Adani firmly denied any wrongdoing in connection with the ongoing US investigation into an alleged $265 million bribery scheme. Now, speaking at the conglomerate's annual general meeting, Gautam Adani stated that neither he nor anyone in the group has been charged with violating the US Foreign Corrupt Practices Act or obstructing justice. Adani said that despite all the noise, no one from the Adani Group has been charged with violating the FCPA or conspiring to obstruct justice. He further said that we live in a world where negativity often echoes louder than the truth. Now, the remarks come amid an investigation by the US Department of Justice and the Securities and Exchange Commission, which allege that between the year 2020 and 2024, bribes were paid to Indian officials to secure solar energy contracts. The alleged scheme, if proven, could involve violations of FCPA securities fraud as well as wire fraud. Meanwhile, a Bloomberg report also suggested that representatives of Adani have been quietly engaging with officials from the Trump-led US administration in recent weeks. But meanwhile, let's listen in to what Gautam Adani said at the AGM yesterday.
This was tested again last year when we faced allegations from the US Department of Justice and the ACC relating to Adani Green Energy. Despite all the noise, the facts are that no one from the Adani Group has been charged with violating the FCPA or conspiring to obstruct justice. We live in a world where negativity often echoes louder than the truth.
Well, Gautam Adani there defending the position of the Adani Group. Meanwhile, aviation watchdog DGCA has flagged several critical safety lapses across major airports following a surveillance exercise conducted in the wake of the fatal Air India crash in Ahmedabad on June 12th. According to the statement released, the Directorate General of Civil Aviation said its teams uncovered recurring defects on aircraft, faded runway markings, worn-out tires, and outdated simulators, raising serious questions about the effectiveness of maintenance and monitoring within the aviation ecosystem. Now, the surveillance operation, led by two DGCA Joint Director Generals, was conducted during night and early morning hours at key hubs, including Delhi and Mumbai. While no specific airlines or operators were named, the regulator said all entities found non-compliant have been instructed to take corrective measures within 7 days. One of the key findings included a scheduled domestic flight being grounded due to severely worn-out tires, allowed to fly only after necessary repairs. The regulator also found discrepancies in simulator configurations used for pilot training, with some not matching the actual aircraft setups and running outdated software versions, posing risks to operational readiness as well as safety. Meanwhile, Union Telecom Minister Jyotiraditya Scindia has issued a strong message in favor of fair competition in India's telecom sector, saying duopoly is not good and there must be intense competition across every vertical. Speaking at a Broadband India Forum event on Tuesday, the minister emphasized that the government's role is to provide multiple avenues for connectivity and ensure customer-centric growth, not to favor one or any company or technology. Now, Scindia was referring to the current market scenario where telecom giants Bharti Airtel and Reliance Jio dominate the space, while Vodafone Idea struggles with financial stress and state-run BSNL is yet to fully roll out even 4G and 5G services across the country. The minister announced that the government will issue rules for delicensing the 6 gigahertz spectrum of 6G before August 15th, paving the way for improved Wi-Fi services and further narrowing the digital divide. He also said that spectrum for satellite communication would be assigned soon on an administrative basis, although no timeline was given for the rollout. He appealed to device and chip manufacturers to lower costs, warning that devices themselves must not become the new digital divide. Listen in.
It's not good enough having a duopoly or one carrier or two carriers. You must have competition in every sector. India today is probably the only country in the world with 4 telcos. Incessant competition in ISPs. Now with BharatNet, we will have DNUs, BharatNet Udyamis, across the length and breadth of our country.
And in a major step towards pushing India's electric mobility mission, the Ministry of Heavy Industries launched the official portal for the scheme to promote manufacturing of electric passenger cars in India. Union Minister H.D. Kumaraswamy, speaking at the launch, called it a defining moment in India's journey towards clean, self-reliant and future-ready mobility. The portal opens up new opportunities for global EV manufacturers to participate in India's fast-evolving automotive sector. Now, the scheme aims to promote domestic manufacturing of electric passenger vehicles and position India as a global hub for automotive innovation and investments. The application window is now officially open and will remain accessible until October 21st this year via the portal. Now, the ministry says the move will not only boost green mobility but also generate investments, create jobs and reinforce India's position in the global electric vehicle industry. It's not apparent at the moment if the new scheme will attract Tesla's investments into India, but it's also important to note that BYD does not qualify for the scheme as the eligibility criteria restricts companies from countries sharing a land border with India. Now, that rules out China's BYD, but for VinFast, the Vietnamese EV maker that is already scheduled to make in India, to be eligible for the incentives of the scheme, it must bring in fresh investments. Listening to the minister.
Tesla, we are not actually expected from them. They have only to start 2 showrooms. They are not interested in manufacturing in India.
In a major development, global pharmaceutical giant Novo Nordisk on Tuesday launched its weight loss drug Wegovy in India. The rollout comes just ahead of the drug's patent expiry next year, which is expected to open the doors for the generic versions in the Indian market. Wegovy is a once-weekly injectable indicated for weight management as well as reducing the risk of major cardiovascular events. The drug will be available in a pen-filled device in 5 dosage options, from a starting dose of just about 0.25 mg to a maintenance dose of 2.4 mg. Pricing ranges from as much as 17,345 rupees a month for the initial doses to as much as 26,015 rupees monthly for the highest dose. And moving on to other global stories that we're tracking for you, this one comes from Japan. Well, Nissan Motor shareholders voiced sharp criticism at the company's annual meeting, blaming top management for the ongoing struggles of Japan's third largest car maker. Some demanded stronger accountability as the firm battles a worsening crisis. Here's a report.
Nissan shareholders showed their frustrations with the automaker at its annual general meeting on Tuesday. They criticised its poor performance, and some demanded greater management accountability for the crisis at the Japanese auto giant. The meeting was the first for new boss Ivan Espinosa, who took over as CEO in April. Shares have fallen some 36% over the last year, and dividend payments have been suspended. Nissan reported a $4.5 billion net loss in the last financial year, and there is no guarantee it will return to profit this year. It's declined to give a full-year earnings forecast and projected a first-quarter loss of $1.38 billion. Espinosa has laid out plans for big cuts. It includes closing 7 plants and losing 20,000 jobs, or around 15% of Nissan's workforce. One shareholder accused the board of trying to shift its responsibility to frontline workers by cutting jobs while keeping their own positions. They further argued the board should change or risk losing the trust of shareholders and employees. Another shareholder complained about the cut to the dividend.
American multinational chain of coffee houses and roastery Starbucks says it's not planning to sell off its China operations, pushing back against a recent report by Chinese magazine Caixin, which cited unnamed sources. More details in this report.
Starbucks has denied reports that it plans a full sale of its operations in China. Local financial magazine Caixin had made the claim without saying where it got the information. It said Monday that the firm had held talks with more than a dozen potential buyers. Reuters sources say Starbucks did kick off a sale process for its China unit in May. It has reportedly asked potential buyers about issues including their management style and corporate culture. However, 2 of the sources say the coffee chain has not yet decided whether to sell a controlling or minority stake. Starbucks declined to offer any further comment on the state of the sale process. It all comes as the company loses market share in China to lower-cost local rivals. That includes brands like Luckin and Coty. They're winning business as China's uncertain economic recovery pushes consumers to seek out cheaper brews. Starbucks also faces competition from ultra-fast home delivery services. That has increasingly seen consumers able to get very cheap coffee brought right to their door. Earlier this month, the US chain responded to all the pressure with its first ever price cuts in China.
Tesla is facing questions from US regulators after videos surfaced showing a robotaxi driving in the wrong lane and speeding past another autonomous vehicle. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration is now gathering information. Take a look.
They only hit public roads on Sunday, but Tesla's robotaxis already face a probe over alleged traffic violations. A small fleet of the vehicles has started operating in Austin, Texas. They're offering rides within a limited zone inside the city. But the US National Highway Traffic Safety Administration says it is seeking information on the operation. Watchdogs say they have reviewed online videos purporting to show one robotaxi speeding and another using the wrong lane. The EV maker did not respond to a request for comment by Reuters, but boss Elon Musk has said the company will be super paranoid about safety. The robotaxis are avoiding bad weather and difficult intersections, and won't carry any children. Separately Monday, Tesla was sued by the estates of 3 people killed in a crash involving one of the firm's Model S sedans. The suit filed in New Jersey says the deaths resulted from defective and unreasonably dangerous design. It centers on Tesla's so-called full self-driving feature. The plaintiffs say the system gives the impression it is capable of fully autonomous driving, when it actually can't cope with many everyday situations. Tesla has said the feature is meant for fully attentive drivers, who are required to keep their hands on the steering wheel. It didn't respond to a request for comment on the lawsuit.
And on to perhaps the biggest story of the day. Well, NASA, Axiom Space and SpaceX are set to launch the 4th private astronaut mission to the International Space Station today. The space mission has been termed as Axiom Mission 4. The mission will launch from Launch Complex 39A at the Kennedy Space Center, Florida, aboard a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket carrying a New Dragon spacecraft. The crew is scheduled to dock with the ISS on Thursday, June 26th, where they will spend about 2 weeks conducting science, outreach and commercial activities. The AX-4 mission is a key milestone in international commercial spaceflight and will be led by Peggy Whitson, a former NASA astronaut. ISRO astronaut and Indian Air Force test pilot Group Captain Shubhanshu Shukla will serve as the mission's pilot, marking it the first time an ISRO astronaut will stay aboard the ISS. Well, let's take you through who is Group Captain Shubhanshu Shukla, an Indian Air Force test pilot who's set to become the first Indian in over 40 years to travel to outer space. We'll leave you with his story.
From the Indian Space Research Organization, AX-4 pilot Shubhanshu Shukla.
Namaste. I'm Group Captain Shubhanshu Shukla.
A fighter pilot for 15 years, he was selected as one of 4 Indian astronauts in 2020.
Captain Shukla, are you ready for the ride? Will you do some yoga in space like your idol Rakesh Sharma did in 1984?
The first Indian astronaut, Wing Commander Rakesh Sharma, traveled to space in 1984. I grew up reading about him in textbooks and listening to his stories from space. I was deeply, deeply impressed by him. This journey that I'm on, it has been a long one for me. And it started out somewhere. I didn't know that this is the path it is going to finally take. I would say that I've been extremely fortunate and extremely lucky to have gotten the opportunities to first fly all my life, which was a dream job for me, and then have the opportunity to apply to astronaut corps, and now consequently be here. The way this worked out for me was that probably a week before we arrived at Axiom was the time I came to know that I will be going. I was extremely excited to be here. I was very, very happy. because this was a possibility for me to actually fly to space. You don't know how to respond to such things.
Shooks his wisdom. The knowledge that he possesses, he could be 130 years old.
For me, having him as my pilot in the Dragon capsule is great. He already has that operational savvy. You know, he's just wicked smart when it comes to spacecraft technologies.
He is very focused and he will basically go 1, 2, 3, 4 in a record time. I don't even know how he gets there so fast.
The team that I'm flying with on this mission, it is fantastic. I do feel that, I have exceptional crewmates. I will have these crew members for this one flight, but post this mission, these are going to be my friends for life.
It has been an amazing journey. These are moments that really tell you that you are getting to be a part of something that is much larger than yourself. I can only say how extremely fortunate I am to be a part of this.
It is my sincere endeavor through my mission to inspire an entire generation back home in the country. I want to use this opportunity to ignite curiosity among kids. Even if this story, my story, is able to change one life, it would be a huge success for me. I am Group Captain Shubhanshu Shukla and I am the mission pilot for Axiom 4 mission.
Every brand tells a story. And they are the storytellers. The Sutradhars. They present a brand with band, baja and barat to you. They are the Brandwalas.
Fertility rates in South India have dropped more sharply.
In the future, you can see it going further down.
Population aging is definitely a cause of concern.
This is an alarming situation. Horror of horrors, the Pollachi horror. Anna University case is despicable.
Of course, there is a political angle everywhere involved.
Can they ever erase the trauma of these Tamil women?
They give a lot of psychological counseling and support to the victims.
Can we still make up?
What is to the nines? In literal terms, it's perfection. But to us, it's not just a phrase, it's an attitude. One that starts at your desk and sends a statement to the world. To the nines is about taking charge. It's a way of life where every